Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make a ruffle skirt using your 1/2 gauge CinDWood Looms. This is one ruffle skirt that I made for my niece. This is a size 4T. The waist is approximately 20.5 inches around and it's about 12 inches long. I found a size chart online that I used to help me with my measurements. This one I made on the 59 peg 1/2 gauge CinDWood Loom. This is the outside of it. It's got a nice drawstring to it so that if you untie it, you can pull it and tighten the waist portion. And this is what it looks like from finished. If you turn it inside out, looks like that. And I'm going to show you how to make one. I'm going to do this one on a 55 peg 1/2 gauge, which should give you about a 19.5 inch waist circumference, which would be great for a size 3T. If you wanted to make a smaller size like a 2T, you could use a 51 inch or 51 peg 1/2 gauge CinDWood Loom. My written pattern instructions will have notes on how to adjust for various sizes. So to start for your ruffle skirt, you're going to need, first of all, your loom. This is, like I said, the 55 peg 1/2 gauge CinDWood Loom. You're going to need roughly 40 yards of ruffle yarn. What I'm using and what I used for my other ruffle skirt is this Peyton's Pirouette yarn. It has 20 yards, and this 2 of these is enough for a skirt, and it's, like I said, it's very, like you see here, it's very full. Definitely want about, and I use just 2 for that one. So depending on the size that you're making and how full you're making, you might be able to get away with using a little less than 40 yards of the ruffle yarn. The ruffle yarn, once you take it off, unwraps and it looks like this. And it's kind of a netted. And this is the type of yarn that you want. It doesn't have to be Peyton's. Red Heart also makes one that's called Sachet. There's the Starbella. Any of these types of ruffle yarns will work for this project. You just need roughly 40 yards of it. Besides the ruffle yarn, for the waistband portion, you're going to need some worsted weight yarn. You really don't need that much. I'm just using, I don't even know what this yarn is. I have some scrap of it left over from a project, or maybe someone actually probably gave me this yarn. So, I'm not exactly sure how much you'll need. Estimate, I would say probably 40 yards. So that is what you need to start. And you also need a loom hook, and I like to always have a tape measure on hand just to measure in case I'm getting at the point where I'm wondering if it's too long or too short. So to begin, you're going to want to unravel some of your ruffle yarn, and you're working with this top portion right here. The bottom portion is a little bit thicker and the top portion is thinner. You want to be using this top portion here, and we're going to cast on our loom. You want to leave a little bit of a tail end that you can either weave in, or I just actually knot at the end, but I'll show you that when we do the finishing. So you're going to leave a little bit of a tail end and you're going to cast on, and you want the ruffle yarn to be facing inside of the loom. We're going to be working inside out. I find this easier to do for this project. And you're going to cast on using every single loop that there is, putting them on each peg. And it doesn't matter if you're using a 55, 59, or the 60, or the 51 peg. You want to do this to every single loop, placing And as you can see, we're going around and we're placing the next consecutive loop onto the loom. And you're just following along. Until you've gotten back. My colored peg here, I always use as my last peg in the row. So now we've cast on using a ruffle yarn. The ruffle yarn is all facing inside the loom. We're working inside out with this project. Now to start row 1, we're going to just simply knit, but instead of using every hole, to make it more full and bounce fluffy, I'm going to use every other. So you're going to take, there's going to be a hole here on your ruffle yarn. You're going to skip that one and you're going to put the next one on, and then you're going to bring your bottom stitch up over the top. And I'll show you from the other angle. I typically work like this. If you had it facing you, this is kind of hard for me, you would take the empty, you would skip one of the holes and put the next hole on. And there's 2 stitches on now, and you bring the bottom over the top, leaving 1 stitch on. You skip one of the next hole in the row, and then you put the next one onto the next peg. And if you wanted, you could do several of these at a time and then go back and knit over, making sure that you're skipping one of the holes. Making sure that there's 2 stitches on each of the, and then bringing the bottom and you're knitting over. Make sure that the one that you bring over to the top is the one that's on the bottom, and then just pull down. And you can see we already are starting to get, and I find it easier for me personally to work this way. So I'm going to go around the entire loom, placing every other hole of the ruffle yarn onto the peg, bringing the bottom loop up over the top. And that is row 1. of the pattern. Now, if you wanted to, you could just keep continuing doing that over and over. I do this for 12 rows, and that gives me the ruffle portion is about 9-10 inches, and then based on the size of the recipient, you can change how wide you're going to make your waistband. So if you wanted it for like a larger size, you'd make this longer or shorter for a smaller. But I'm going to keep going around and do an entire row where I'm placing every other. And then I will join up with you. I'm going to actually do 2 rows like this, and then I'm going to show you what I do to help so that it's not quite as full, or the alternative method if you don't want to use every other. And I'll join you back up after I have 2 rows of my ruffle skirt completed. And like I said, you're just putting the every other peg or every other hole on every single peg of the loom. And then you're bringing the bottom, knitting over, bringing the bottom over the top. So that's pretty easy. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 more, or I'm going to complete this row, and then I'm going to do 1 more row, and I will join back up with you and show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, I'm just finishing up now my second row of doing knit using every other hole on the top of the ruffle yarn. I'm placing them on the pegs, skipping one, putting the next one on, skipping one, putting the next one on, skipping one, putting the next one on, skipping one, putting the next hole on the peg, skipping one, putting the next on, skipping, putting the next on. This is my last peg of my row. I want to make sure that I go back around, and any of the pegs that have 2 stitches on, I want to bring the top up over, or the bottom up over the top, I'm sorry. So that there's 2, and I want to make sure that it's actually the bottom. Sometimes when you're placing them on, you accidentally, they can get shifted around and you can end up bringing the wrong stitch over. So make sure that you're bringing the bottom up over the top. And now I have 2 rows completed, and what I like to do is just sort of tug down at all of the stitches, securing the stitches. Now, for the 3rd row, what I did for my skirt, the first one that I made, and I'm going to do for this one as well, just to help add some variation and also make it not as full, is this row I'm going to place every hole on top of the ruffle yarn, and then place onto the peg all the way around. And then bring the bottom stitch up over the top. And you can feel free to play around with how you use your ruffle yarn in your loom. You might find that you like using for the entire skirt, that you like using every hole on it. You might find that you like using every other. It can vary depending also on the ruffle yarn you use. I just get bored personally with doing the same thing over and over, so I think this is probably was my solution to switch things up a bit. So this is row 3, and all I'm doing is placing the ruffle yarn. I'm placing every single stitch all the way around every other hole, or every hole on the top of the yarn onto the pegs, every peg, and then going back and bringing the bottom up over the top. So I'm doing this for row 3. And I pull down to secure the stitches so I know that they're not going to pop back off. Right now it's going to look like this from the outside. From the inside you're going to see the layers of the ruffle. So row 3, you just want to keep going around, placing every stitch, every hole on top onto every peg, and sort of just unraveling the yarn as you go, and then bringing the bottom up over the top. And this is row 3. I'm using every hole. Row 5 and 6, or row 4 and 5, I'm sorry, row 4 and 5, I did exactly like I did row 2 and 3. Or 1 and 2, I mean. I'm sorry, I can't think today. So for rows 1 and 2, we're skipping every other hole. Row 3, we're placing every stitch. Row 4 and 5, we're doing every other hole. And row 6, we're going to do exactly like row 3, like I'm doing now. And we're going to do every. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row, and then I will join you back up when I'm starting on row 4. Okay, I just finished row 3. I'm going to start with row 4. Row 4 and 5, I'm going to do like I had done rows 1 and 2, where I am skipping the one hole and placing the second onto the peg, skipping a hole, placing the second onto the peg, skipping and placing the second onto the peg. And I'm going to do that all the way around, bringing the bottom and knitting over. And then pulling down to tighten it up. So this is the body portion of the skirt. I do 12 rows like this, and I alternate between doing 2 rows where I'm skipping every other peg, and then 1 row, or every other hole, not peg, every other hole on the yarn. I alternate between 2 rows where I'm skipping every other hole on the yarn, and 1 row where I'm using every. It's really personal preference. You could use you could just continue to do 12 rows where you're skipping every other, but this is how I like to do, or this is how I ended up doing mine. And so I'm going to do another 2 rows where I'm skipping every other hole and knitting over, and then I'm going to do row 6 where I'm placing every hole just like I did on row 3. So I'm going to keep working, and I'm going to join up, and then I'm going to show you how when I need to change to another ball of the ruffle yarn, I'll show you how I go ahead and do that. So keep working, and I'll show you how to cast on with another when I run out of yarn. Okay, so I've been working on my ruffle skirt for the body portion, and I am just about out of this current ball of yarn. So I'm going to simply leave a little bit of a tail end here and begin working again now with my second. And I'm going to leave both ends, I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail so that I can tie them together or weave them in, depending on your method you like to use, when I'm done. So I'm just going to, on this row right now that I'm on, I've been doing every other. And I'm going to finish up that row just like I was doing in this row. Like I said, I was doing every other. And I'm just going to bring the bottom up over the top. So for the ruffle skirt, for the body portion, you're just going to keep working, doing each row. You can either use every other hole or every hole in the ruffle yarn until your desired length. Like I said, I did 12 rows for the one I made on the 59 peg loom. This one I might do a little bit shorter. You can always take your tape measure and measure and see how long it is. So right now, I know it's hard to see the numbers, but right now the total length is about 8 inches, and I've done, I think I'm on row 6 or 7 now. So I think I'm going to make this one a little bit shorter just to save some time. You can make it however long or short you want, adding more or less rows. And also the ruffle yarn you use will have an impact on how long you make it, and that's why I like to have a tape measure on hand, because that way you can measure and decide how long you want it. I have a generic chart here that I found online, and typically for a size 2T or a 3T, for 2T you want about 10 inches, for a 3T you want about 11 inches total length. And that's going to be to the knee for length. So if you want a little bit shorter of a skirt or is more of a tutu, you can do less rows. So I'm gonna do about 2 more rows just to add a little bit more length, and then I'll join up with you on my last row. My last row, I'm going to want to make sure that I find it easier for my last row that I'm going to do to place every hole on each peg of the ruffle yarn. But I'm going to do 2 more rows using every other, and then I'm going to do a row, and I'll show you my last row. So I'm now starting on another row. I want to say I'm on row 7 now. I took a lunch break and I lost track, and really that's where it comes in handy to either mark down or rely on your tape measure. It's not an exact science. You can make these longer or shorter. The main thing is going to be when you join your worsted weight yarn, to keep track of that on how you do your waist. So I'm going to do a couple more rows and join back up, and I'll show you the last roll of my ruffle using my ruffle yarn, and then how we do the waist. Okay, I actually just counted my ruffles, and I have done 6 rows now, which currently measures about 7 inches. So I'm going to do 3 more rows. Row 7, I'm going to do, so that would make this 9 rows total that I'm doing for this size, which is the 3T ruffle skirt. Rows 7 and 8, I'm going to simply do where I'm placing every other hole on my ruffle yarn and knitting over. Now, if you're going to do it on the 59 peg, I would suggest that you do 12 rows. And as I do this, now I'm realizing with the smaller loom, for the smaller size, I'm going to do 9 rows. If I was to do a size 2T on the 51 peg loom, I would only do 6 rows total before I started the waist portion. So I'm going to do 3 more rows, 2 where I'm skipping every other, and then my last row I'm going to place every single peg, or every single hole on each peg. And I will join you back up when I get to my last row before we cast on with the worsted weight yarn. Okay, I'm just finishing up row 9. And on row 9 I am casting on with every hole on the ruffle yarn, placing on each peg up until the last peg. And then I'm going to want to go and make sure that I knit over so that there's only 1 stitch that remains on each peg. So we now have the ruffle portion. It's inside out because we're working with the ruffle yarn facing in, which I find just a little bit easier to work with. And now we're ready to begin our waist portion. Now we want to keep the ruffle yarn because we're going to bring it back up yet. Excuse me, I'm trying to get situated here. I'm using a worsted weight yarn. It's similar in weight to, it could very well be Red Heart Super Saver. It feels a little bit softer than Red Heart Super Saver. My guess is it's probably Hobby Lobby's I Love This worsted, I think it's called, yarn. I found it in my stash and it matches very well with the ruffle yarn that I'm using. So to start the waist portion, we're simply going to E-wrap cast on. I'm going to place a slip knot on peg 1, and my ruffle yarn that I had I'm just going to leave right there. I'm placing my slip knot on peg 1, and I'm going to E-wrap cast on every peg in the loom, on the loom, all the way around, and then knit over bringing the bottom ruffle yarn up over the top, leaving just one strand of the worsted weight yarn. And pulling down. So I'm going to continue going around, doing the E-wrap stitch. Bringing the bottom up over the top. And you do that all the way around until your last pig, and I'll join you back up. Okay, I have now E-wrap cast on with my worsted weight yarn, and I'm ready to start my next row for my waist portion. In this row, we're just going to purl every pig. So we're going to go around and we're going to purl every pig in the row. And now you're only working with your worsted weight yarn, and you're purling every pig. In this case, you're purling 55 pegs as you go around. I'm going to go ahead and finish up purling all 55 pegs, and then I will show you the next step in the skirt. Okay, I'm back at, I am purling. I did a row of purl. I'm purling my last pig. The next row is going to be a row of knit. And for the knit stitch, we're going to do the U-wrap knit stitch. So you're placing your yarn across the pig and wrapping it towards the back, and then bringing the bottom stitch up over the top. And that is the U-wrap knit stitch, and that is the knit stitch that we're going to use. And we're going to knit the entire row using the U-wrap. And I actually find it easier for me when I knit to work backwards like this. But however you work, you just want to bring your working yarn across the front of the pig and knit over. You don't want it to be too tight. And you keep going around like that, and you do all 55 pegs, however many pegs you're using on your loom, and then I will show you the next part of, we just completed a row of knit. The next part of this ruffle skirt is we're going to bring it back up, and we're going to, hang on, I've got some stitches that got caught there. Your ruffle yarn that we had dropped into the middle before, we're now going to, you want to leave your working yarn, your worsted weight yarn here. And what we're doing here is we're doing a technique so that we don't have these gaps here when we start our waist portion, and so that it smooths a little bit, lays a little bit nicer like on this skirt. So to do this, we're keeping our working yarn up over here. We're bringing our ruffle yarn that we had dropped back down through the center back up, and we're going to cast back on with the ruffle yarn using every peg on every hole. Once we have both the ruffle yarn and the previous row's knit stitch, we're going to purl each peg, treating the ruffle yarn and the worsted weight yarn from the previous row as if they were one, bringing them back up and over. So we're doing a purl stitch. You can see here we have the ruffle yarn and the worsted weight yarn. We're treating them as if they're one, bringing the working yarn below and purling, taking both of the stitches, the ruffle yarn and the worsted weight yarn, and leaving our new purl stitch on. So you want to continue going around the loom, placing one strand, one hole from our ruffle yarn back onto the loom. You can go ahead and place several of these on at a time, and then going back and purling each peg treating that as if it was just one strand, but you're working with bringing both the bottom up over the top. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. So you can see here I have both. I'm picking up and purling the new loop. This is the loop that will be placed onto the peg. The two stitches that were on there, I'm bringing up, back over, and then pulling tight. Again, I'm doing that to the very next peg and each additional peg in the row. So continue on doing this to each stitch, making sure that you place the ruffle yarn on each one of the pegs and purling together, treating them as if they were one. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row, and I'll join you back up when I've completed it. Okay, I'm back at the beginning. I cast on with my ruffle yarn and I did a row of purl, and now we're at the point where we can cut our ruffle yarn, leave a little bit of a tail so you can work it in and weave it in and secure it, and your extra ruffle yarn you're going to want to make sure to keep on hand for when we do the drawstring portion of the waistband. So from now on we are just working with our worsted weight yarn. We did a row of purl, and we're going to continue on with the knit purl. We're going to do a row of knit starting now. We're going to go all the way around the loom, doing the knit stitch. Once we've done a row of knit, we're then going to do a row of purl. Repeat the knit purl combination a total of 4 to 5 times for the size 3T. For my 4T one, I repeated it 7 times. It really depends on how long you want to make the waist portion. But we're going to do a knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, row of knit, row of purl, row of knit, row of purl, row of knit, row of purl, for a total of 12 rows total. Sorry, I'm out of it right now. So go ahead and do 1 row of knit, 1 row of purl, and do that for 12 rows, and I will meet you back up. Okay, I'm just completing my 12th row of my garter stitch, where I did a row of knit and I did a row of purl for 12 rows. So I'm ending this 12th row right now, and I'm purling the last 2 pegs. And you can see here that I have 12 rows that I've completed with the garter stitch, and it look like this from the front of your loom. The next step to making your ruffle skirt is to knit 1 row using the U-wrap. And like I said, the U-wrap, you just bring the working yarn in front. Unlike the E-wrap where you bring it around in the back, the U-wrap is very much like a flat knit stitch, but you're wrapping it slightly back before you bring it up and over, so that the tension is not too tight. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to knit this entire row, and this is the next portion. So this is row 13 in this case, and you want to continue knitting all the way around the loom, knitting each peg. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row up, knitting each peg using the U-wrap knit stitch, and then I will show you the next step. Okay, here I am back finishing my row of knit stitches. I'm going to knit my last peg using the U-wrap knit stitch. The next step for the ruffle skirt is to E-wrap a row. So you're going to go around bringing your working yarn from behind each peg, making an E type of a motion, or E type motion with your working yarn, bringing your bottom stitch up over the top, and that is how you do the E-wrap stitch. And you want to do this all the way around your loom for each peg. So I'll show you a couple more times. You're bringing the working yarn behind to the front and then back to the back. You're doing that to each peg as you go around your loom, and then knitting over. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to E-wrap each peg in the loom all the way around, and then I will join you back up and show you the next step. We're getting close to the end. Okay, I'm now finishing my row of E-wrap with my last peg. Now we're going to start working as a flat panel. And this is going to be where we use to insert the drawstring so we can adjust the waist. So to begin working with the flat panel, we E-wrap the last peg. The first step is to skip the peg. So we're skipping the first peg in the row, and then we're going to knit each peg using the U-wrap again, not the E-wrap. Bringing the yarn, we're going to knit each peg like this all the way around. Remember, we did not knit this peg here. We're knitting the pegs all the way around the loom until we get back to the peg before, the black one here, which I use as my end peg. I'm going to go ahead and do get towards the end and I will join you back up. I'm now finishing up my row of knit using the U-wrap, and I'm going to knit the last peg in the row. And since I'm working as a flat panel, I'm not going to continue working. I'm going to skip this peg that I just knit, bring it up to the front, and this time I'm going to start with a row of purl. So I'm going to purl each stitch in the row, starting with the second peg. We didn't purl the first peg. And we're going to purl every stitch around the loom for this row until we get to this peg right here. And this peg, when you get here, we're not going to purl it, we're going to knit it. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue on purling each peg, and then I'll join you back up and show you how to start the next, how to finish this row and start on the next row. So just keep continuing to purl each peg. Do not purl the last peg though. Wait, and I will show you how that is done. Okay, I'm back at the end of my row. I'm going to purl the second to last peg. And then my last peg, I'm going to do a knit stitch. And now we're ready to start on our next row. And all we're doing is repeating those 2 rows where you skip the first peg and you knit the next row using the U-wrap all the way around, and you're just repeating the 2 rows I showed you for repeating it 3 times for a total of 8 rows. So you want to always skip the first peg because we're doing a slip stitch edge. So when you start the row and you're working as a flat panel back and forth, keep skipping each time you start. Skip the first peg in the row and always knit the last peg in the row, regardless if you've done a row of purl or knit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to repeat those 2 rows that I just showed you, and now I'm on my 3rd row. So I'm going to repeat those 3 times, and I'm going to do a total of 8 rows, and then I will join you back up and show you the next step. Okay, I'm just finishing up my 8th row. In this last row, sorry for my dog, this last row was a row of purl, and we're still working as a flat panel. My last stitch in the row I'm going to knit, and you've done now 8 rows, and you're going to have a little opening right here that looks like that, which is where you're going to be able to put the drawstring through. So we have 4 rows left now before we get to the point where we get to bind off and finish our skirt. We're going to begin working in the round again. So to start working in the round, we're going to do a row of knit. And like I said, we have 4 rows left. We're going to knit using the U-wrap 1 row. Row 2, you're going to do a row of purl all the way in the round. Row 3, again, you're going to knit using the U-wrap. And row 4, our last row before we bind off and finish this ruffle skirt, is going to be a row of purl. I'm going to go ahead and finish doing this row, and then I'll show you how I start the next row of purl, and you're going to repeat the row of the knit and the row of purl 1 more time for a total of 4 rows. Okay, here I'm back at my last peg, and I'm going to knit the last peg, and I'm going to start my 2nd row, which is going to be a row of purl stitches. So we're working in the round again. So we're going to purl each peg in the row. After we've completed this row of purl, We're going to do one more row of knit using the U-wrap knit stitch, and then one more row of purl. I'm going to go ahead and finish those up. I want to show you how it looks inside now. You can see that it's starting to join back up. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row of purl. Then I'm going to do one more row of knit in the round and one more row of purl in the round. And I'll join back up with you and show you how to finish your skirt. Okay, I have just finished doing the row of knit, a row of purl, row of knit, and a row of purl. That's 4 rows. And my loom currently on the inside looks like this. From the outside, like this. So I'm now going to show you how to bind off. Before you begin binding off, you're going to want to take your ruffle yarn scrap, and depending how much you have left over, you're going to want to you want to leave enough so that there is going to be enough to work all the way around the loom to insert into your drawstring waistband, and also have some left over to tie. So if you've got a lot left, you can trim it down. I'm going to just wrap it around about 2.5, 3 times around my loom, just so I know I have enough of the yarn, and then cut it with my scissors. And I still have enough here that my stepdaughter can use it to make a bracelet or something. So now we're going to start bringing up our row. This is kind of going to be tricky. You can see right here there was a row of E-wrap that we did. It's going to look like purl though from this inside of the row, but it's going to be the row right before we started doing the flat panel, and that's what you're going to want to bring up onto your loom going around, and I'll show you how that's done. And while we're doing that, we're going to be working our ruffle yarn. And for now, I'm just going to thread one of the ends through the hole. And I'm going to work, it really doesn't matter which way you work while you do this. You want to leave your worsted weight yarn still on, because we're going to use that to bind off. So I've put a little bit of the ruffle yarn through the hole, and it's the row right before. And it's actually your E-wrap row that you're bringing up back onto the loom. And as you go, you want to make sure that the ruffle yarn is inside. I know it's kind of hard to see right now because the ruffle yarn is such a close color to and I'm just making sure that I have the and I don't think I did have the maybe I did. So you're just going around, picking up each stitch and bringing it back up on the loom in that row. And you can just sort of follow along as you go, and make sure as you're working that you're keeping the ruffle yarn inside. You could also use like an I-cord, or if you want to insert like an elastic band, this is where you could insert an elastic band here before you did your bind off. So you keep going around, picking up the stitch that's next. And sometimes it's hard to see and it just takes a little bit of But this is the row that you're picking up that you did right before you started working as a flat panel. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Picking up each stitch. And once I've gotten around closer to the end, I will join you back up. Okay, I'm getting back to the beginning, and hopefully if everything's worked out, I will have the appropriate stitches brought back up on the loom. So I am still, the ruffle yarn is still inserted. As you can see, I've been bringing up my row. And I'm following along, picking up each stitch extra. And yay! Sorry. And what I'm going to do is that last, just so it's not in my way while I bind off. I'm going to take this back off. And I'm going to bring this extra ruffle yarn through down the, so that it's through the hole as well, and just so it's not in my way. So now I have both of the strands coming out. They're actually going to be moved back, but and now I'm going to put this last stitch on, and now we are ready to start binding off. Before you bind off, what I have done is I just knit over each peg. So you want to go around and just knit over each peg in your loom. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll join you back up and I'll show you how the bind off and finishing. Okay, to bind off our ruffle skirt, we're going to use the basic bind off. To do the basic bind off, you're going to E-wrap pegs 1 and 2. Bringing the bottom stitch up over the top. And you want to make sure you keep your stitches loose so that it's not too tight. You're bringing the second stitch over to the first peg and then knitting over. You're taking the stitch that was on peg 1 and you're placing it onto peg 2. From here on, we're just going to E-wrap the next peg, bring it over, once we've knitted over, after we brought it over, move it over to the empty peg. And we're going to keep doing this around the loom until we have only one stitch that remains on our loom. Okay, I have 2 stitches remaining. I'm going to E-wrap the last one. Bring it over. Knit over. And now I can go ahead and cut my working yarn, leaving a, I don't know, tail to weave in, maybe a 6 to, I always leave extra, and probably about a foot that I have left. And I'm going to simply pull the last loop off, and I'm going to keep that loop on my hook, get the loom out of the way. I'm going to draw the yarn, the working yarn, the tail end through that last loop to help secure it, and pull tight. Now watch the magic. You're going to fold the skirt inside out. The tail ends that we had, that's our waist. We want the drawstrings to be in the front though. And so I'm going to bring them through the hole to the front. And I don't know if I did something wrong here or what, but there's this extra loop, so I can't remember if this happened the last time or not. But I'm going to bring one under, one over, you know, it's simply a process of weaving in it and securing any loose ends that you have. So I'm going to take my working yarn, I'm going to thread it through, and what I'm going to do is thread it to the back, and this is optional. You can just secure it and leave this hole empty, or if you want it to not have a gap in the inside of your skirt, sorry, I'm out of view there, you could stitch these two together. Which is what I'm going to do for this skirt, just to give it a little bit of a more professional finished look. And I'm just going to work on the edges from the flat panel, working back stuck on something. Working back and forth and then sort of stitching that closed so that it looks nice. And you can play around with that type of however you want to seam that together, if you do choose to seam that together, and then weave in and secure. You're still going to have a hole up here in front, and that's going to allow you to gather your yarn. I like to put a little bit of a knot on the bottom of the ruffle yarn. And then just sort of trim to however much of it I want left over. And these scissors are kind of very dull. So when I get better scissors, I'll trim it better. But I want to do that to both ends, and I'm probably going to leave this about this length, and that'll give me enough to tie a bow. So I'm going to cut this other one because I have too much extra. So I'll tie a knot first. So they're about the same length. Trim the extra. And we'll just pretend that I've done securing and weaving in my loose ends. I'll probably go back and make that look a little, actually that looks pretty good. When you do that, you don't want it to be too tight. If you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring one more in. And then I'm going to just sort of thread it through a couple additional stitches to secure it. And pull on it and make sure that it seams secure. And I'm going to go back and probably thread some more in and secure it and weave it in just to make sure that it's good. Any of your yarns that you have had, like if you've had to attach, here I've had to attach, was where I attached the two. I'm just going to take those and do a knot where I'm bringing both this end and this end through and pulling tight. You could also try to weave in this. I find it easier just to knot it. It's a ruffle yarn. It's not really noticeable from either side. Well, it doesn't really matter if it's noticeable from the inside, but you can't really feel it. Trim that. The yarn that I started here with the cast on, I'm just going to kind of weave up. Through. Moving it loose. And I'll weave it through, and probably just right there. Thread it back up through another one of these, and tie a knot. There you go. And just sort of make sure to pull on it to make sure that it is secure. Once again, trimming any extra. There also should be a little bit of a tail end here and a tail end here from when you joined in. Both of these I'm going to just sort of pull through the inside of the skirt. Leaving it so that it's loose, and then I'm going to take my tapestry needle, which I seem to be having trouble with today, and I'm going to weave that up. And just sort of go around. Just so that you can't see it on the front. And then I'm going to knot these two together. Now, the knots that I like to use when I'm working with the yarn, with any type of yarn that I find is very secure if I'm going to do a knot, is like that. You bring them over, and you bring the one tail under and the other tail under, and then you pull. And you just want to make sure that this end doesn't get too and then just sort of pull tight, make sure it's secure. As you can tell, it lays really flat, so it's not going to be a real bulky knot. Other option is to try to just weave it in and not do any knots. cut any extra working yarn that you have. I'm just double checking that that one should be good. And now yeah, I can trim that, that's secure. Your ruffle skirt is complete. You can tighten it around the waist. You can use your ruffle yarn to tie a little bow, which could either go on the front or on the side. Finished measurements. From top to bottom, I have about, it's kind of hard to see in this angle right here. See if I can back up my camera a little bit. I'm about 11 inches long. And the top of the waist measures laying flat about 9.5 inches. So going around, it's right around 19.5 inches, like I was hoping it would be, which should be a perfect size for 3T. And the yarn does have, you know, like if I didn't have this tied, it does stretch quite a bit too. It's got stretchability. So you could probably even go up to a 4T with this size. Otherwise, use a 59 peg loom. But there you have the finished ruffle skirt. And this can be used in a lot of different size looms. And I have my PDF pattern available, which shows 3 different sizes for toddlers. Instructions on how to do that, and I am going to begin working on an adult-sized one for myself and one for my stepdaughter, who is 9, but she's growing like a weed lately, so she's been actually shopping in the junior section a lot. She's probably, I don't know, some of our clothes we can share now. So I'll be getting patterns and pictures and possibly videos for those skirts as well. Just absolutely love these. Again, back side of your skirt, front side, and with it turned inside out. Thanks for joining me. I hope this is helpful. I can't wait to see some pictures of finished ruffle skirts. Happy looming!